All right, good morning, everybody. If you guys want to find your way to your seat, we'll get going. Hey, we're going to take a hiatus from regularly scheduled programming in Luke, and we're going to take a break from that just for 2 weeks. And so I noticed there's quite a few people missing today. And so kind of end of the summer, like get that vacation in before school starts. And so we will catch them on the flip side of this. But I wanted to talk about some stuff today that will help us at this chapter in the story of Vertical. So those of you who know, we're next month, do you guys realize the church is 2 years old? We're a toddler, we're just learning to crawl. There's lots of things when a church starts, they kind of go through different stages. We're in this infancy stage. And so we're at this unique space and a time of the church. And so one of the things that I wanted to talk about is related to that season. And what we're going to talk about today in regards to jumping in and serving and what that means for the next season is super important here. And so as I was thinking about jumping into serving, I was thinking about earlier this year, my oldest daughter had talked me into running a half marathon with her. And so late last year, we had run the Clearwater Rock and Roll half marathon. And I thought, well, that was it. It was good. It was fun. It was on the beach. We ran it. We didn't run it together or anything, but we just kind of, ran it, got each other at the end, ate some bananas, drank some Gatorade, and made our way to Shake Shack, because you can eat whatever you want after a half marathon, you're good. And so we came home, and then she's like, it'd be fun to do the Las Vegas one. And I'm like, oh, yeah, and I was thinking, that's a great idea. She's, way younger than I am. And I was like, no, that doesn't sound so great. Yeah, you should think about that, because it's, not only running, but getting there and all that jazz. And so anyway, they come up with a sale, and it's, half price. And she's like, we should do it. And I thought back to okay, yeah, we could take some big trip here, cashed in some plane tickets or cashed in some miles on plane stuff and made it out to Las Vegas. And so here's what they do for the Las Vegas half marathon, for the rock and roll marathon. They shut down the strip at night, so you get to run on the strip. There's no cars. You get all the way down to the south end by the airport, all the way back up to Fremont Street, all the way back down to the belly of the beast there on the strip. So we did it. I shuffled my way through 13.1 out in the deserts of southern Nevada earlier this year. And as we were there, if you've ever been to Vegas, there's all these really cool hotels. And so when you're there, you're like, I want to go in there and see what they're like. Everyone's different themed. And so we went into a bunch of them. And in every one, there's a casino, right? And you got these people sitting at a chair, pressing a button or, just kind of waiting for the slot to roll up and be everything that they ever hoped would happen, get the jackpot. You see people sitting at the card tables or all the other tables, gambling away, thinking they're going to be the one that hits the jackpot, right? They're the ones who are going to beat the odds, because we all know, when you go there, the odds are in the favor of the house, right? That, yeah? But people go there and flock there by the millions, put in all that money into those machines or give it to the dealer there, and they make these bets thinking they're going to be the one that actually beats the odds, right? And why do they think that? Because some people do, right? Some people beat the odds, and they're thinking, and maybe you've been there, you're thinking, that's going to be me. I'm going to be the one that does it. And so as I was prepping the message, I kind of remembered what was going on there. And I thought to myself, when we were there, I could have literally ruined everybody's vacation when I was there. Because I was reminded of a stat that in regards to hitting the jackpot. Could you imagine if I would have kind of, got up next to somebody who's pressing the button at some slot machine, they've been there all night thinking this is going to be the one, and then put some more money in and press the button, this is going to be the one, or somebody at the card table, if I would have just kind of sneaked up next to them and just kind of said, hey, you know what? You're wasting your money. You're wasting your money. You're not going to hit it rich. Here's the odds for you. Did you know that you're 121 times more likely to be struck and killed by lightning than to hit the jackpot in Vegas? 121 times more likely to do that. So let that one soak in for a second. So let's just say you were thinking, I'm going to save up my coin. I'm going to go out there. I'm going to have some fun, go to some of the restaurants, see some of the hotels, maybe play a few games, and I think I might be the one. Or it's, if I snuck up to next to those people and I said, hey, you're not going to win. You're 121 times more likely to be struck and killed by lightning. So you let that sink in for a second. That means after 120 times of going outside, and we get it here in Central Florida, right? There are times when you're in a parking lot and it's raining and you're like, I got to go from my car to that store, and you're like, and the lightning's going. Has anybody else been in that where you're like, oh man, like you're sneaking, you're like, you're trucking to get inside that. So we get lightning here, but after 120 times of getting struck by lightning, and then they resuscitate you and check you out and let you go home from the hospital. Once you've cleared all that, the 121st time that happens to you, and then they resuscitate you, and then they clear you and send you home, that's when you want to book. That's when you want to book a nonstop out to Vegas. Go ahead and hit the tables, do whatever it is. That's when you want to go hit the jackpot, because now you've got a chance. So for those of you, anybody been hit by lightning? Nobody. 121 times from now, think about it. Think about it, all right? Now, all of that to say, we live in a world where our lives are constantly inundated with this message coming at us all the time, where message after message after message is pumping into our head an ideology or a philosophy that sells us on these ideas that we could have this, we could go there, we could be this, we could achieve whatever it is. All these things are being pumped into our head. And have you noticed that all of them overpromise and underdeliver? Have you noticed that? Like the new car smell wears off, doesn't it? And then you got to make that payment month after month after month. Even the new house, you're like, oh, the dream house. If we could just get out of this shack and move to that neighborhood in that house, that would be better. Only to find out that carpet needs to be replaced, the foundation shifts, your lanai doesn't smell so good, it gets a little bit moldy, a little bit, gangly in there, right? Like you got to replace stuff, got to replace a roof, a storm comes. There's always something about your house that you got to fix, right? The vacation, if you could just go there, if you could just cut away for a couple weeks and just go see that, then you get there and it overpromised and underdelivered. Not that you can't enjoy it, it's just not everything that it's cracked up to be. And there's so many things that are coming at us where they overpromise and underdeliver. And so this morning, what I want us to just spend a few minutes on, and just looking at your faces, all of this stuff, I'm just going to reintroduce something to you. All I'm doing is reintroducing something, maybe bringing a different angle to it that maybe you've heard before. Maybe you've read about this in the Bible. You've certainly witnessed other people doing it. And just looking around, you've certainly been a part of it. You've certainly engaged in what it means to be a part of what God is doing in the world. But from time to time, we lose our way and we kind of sit back and it kind of life can pass us by. And we can be inspired and kickstarted into a direction where most of the world never goes, but I'm just going to bring us back to a place that will help us in this next chapter of Vertical that I just want to invite you guys into, all right? So today I want us to think about a couple things that were a huge, huge thing back in the day of Jesus. I want you to think about this big basin that would have existed by a door, an entrance door, a big basin that's filled with water, and next to that, like a little stool with a towel on it. And so what would happen is this basin and this towel was an instrumental tool in the life back in the day. Because when you were out in the world, right, just kind of going about your life, working, running errands, taking care of things, visiting friends, whatever it was, wherever you were trekking in dirt. Like they didn't have asphalt, they didn't have sidewalks like we have now. Coupled with the fact that they're wearing sandals. And so you're tromping around out in the dirt. So over the course of the day, between it being hot and you just kind of moving to and from places, you're going to build up a nice little crust on your feet there, like a little bit of stuff on there. And so when you would then go, let's say your friend's having a dinner party, you show up to go hang out with them. They're like, hey, come over for dinner. You would expect to go into their house, and there right in the entranceway, there would be a basin and a towel to wash wash your feet, to get some of that gunk and that muck and mire off of your feet, because you've been out in it all day. And so what we're dealing with back in the day, like this is an important part of the landscape, especially during meal times. Because meal times back in Jesus' day, they don't sit at a table like we do here. Like, here's my table, here's my chair, and I'm upright and just kind of looking face to face with people and having a conversation. No, they reclined. And so when they were reclining, the table is much shorter. They were reclining, which means you're leaning this way. The next guy's leaning that way. The next guy's leaning that way, which means your face is right by somebody else's feet. Now, the basin and the towel kind of takes on a whole new meaning, right? Considering where they've been working, where they've been walking, no asphalt, no sidewalk, dirt, junk everywhere, sweaty, coming into a dinner party. Now, all of a sudden, if your face is by somebody else's feet, you care. You care about that basin and that towel. So it's a guarantee that you're going to have some dirty feet. So clean feet, pretty important here. If you're going to have a dinner party, you're going to have some people over, you're going to have a good evening, the basin and the towel is essential. Now, before we jump into today's verses, I also want to remind us as we get ready to go into the Bible. So if you have your Bible, go ahead and open up to John chapter 13. As we're going there, as you guys are going there, let me just let you guys know about back in the day when a rabbi, a teacher, had students. Those students were like in lockstep with that rabbi. They wanted to know what that rabbi knew. They wanted to do what that rabbi did. They wanted to be so close that they could ask questions of their rabbi, like, hey, this just happened, or you just processed this. Like, how did you get here? And what was your process to get from point A to point B? Like, how do you feel about all this? They wanted to know everything that the rabbi knew. And so the rabbi would have these guys in close proximity to them. And they wanted to zero in on everything about what that rabbi did because they wanted to be like that rabbi. They wanted to do what that rabbi did. And so these guys would have been in lockstep, which makes John 13 even more interesting, as we're about to find out. Because likely what we're going to read here, likely what happened is what Jesus engages in as these disciples, rabbi, likely shocked something inside of them to life. Kind of jump-started something inside of them that maybe they have never even thought about. And it's all made possible because Jesus understood a principle that we reproduce who we are. About a year ago, when we were kind of walking through what a disciple does, I brought this up over and over throughout this disciple series. If you were here, you'll probably remember that phrase. Like, we reproduce who we are. We might think a certain way, but then our life leads a different way. What we do is seen, and what we think should influence what we do, but sometimes those are two different things. And so we have to really marry those things together so that what we think and what we do are together, understanding we reproduce who we are. Not who we want to be, not who we think we are, who we are. Like, you can see that play out over and over and over. And so here we hit John chapter 13, and what is getting ready to go down is one of those dinner parties that I talked about just a minute ago. So when you have people coming over and they're showing up at your doorstep, you want to make sure that basin and that towel is there. Now, back in the day, what would typically happen is the host of that particular party would hire somebody to take care of that, hire a servant to go ahead and wash the feet. And so when you have these 12 guys that I mentioned that Jesus had earlier, he's been investing in these guys now for years. This is not at the beginning of his ministry. This is towards the end. He's been walking with these guys for 3 years. And so they show up at this room. Everything's ready to go. They come into the room. There's the dinner table. They see the basin and the towel. They're like, okay, like we're here at the request of Jesus. We're here to hang out with him. Now, they don't know all that's going to go on, but they just know they got an invite. And so you could imagine what's going on. Like, just picture the scene, because I think sometimes we read things like this and we're like, oh, yeah, I think I understand. But, like, let your mind go to the scene that you're actually walking in to this room and seeing what it would actually be like. Because if you're like me, like, I place myself in those guys' shoes, and I'm not saying I'm one of the apostles, like, and I'm not saying you're one of them, but I'm just saying, like, if you picture going into the room, this is kind of typically how people think. Right? You're going to walk in that room and you're going to like, oh, okay, like I've been outside all day. My feet are grimy and messy and smelling. It's not good. I need the basin and the towel here. This is actually going to be a benefit to me. You walk in, there's no servant there. So you can imagine that what the disciples did, they're probably kind of, like looking around. They're like, what's going on? Like, dude, am I early? Am I, like, where's everybody at? And so one by one, they start coming in, darting to the right, to the left, like, where's the guy? Like, where's the person who's going to wash my feet? Right? There's no foot washer guy. Not sure why, but I'd play this out if I were those guys. Like, that's what I would be doing, right? Now, here's what I think would have happened. The people with seniority, because they thought this way, because you read some of the other Gospels, and it's like, oh, well, who's going to be most important? Who's going to be at his right and who's at his left? So they thought in terms of hierarchy, because that's what humanity likes to do. We like to compare, right? Like, where do I fit here? Like, who does Jesus, like you read about how one of the disciples beat the other because he was faster to the tomb, right? Or the one that Jesus loved, how convenient that he's the one who wrote that book. And so there's some little battle going, a little bit of power struggle. So they show up into the room, and you can just imagine that some of these guys are probably looking to the right and to the left, no foot washer guy, there's the basin, there's the towel, and they're probably thinking, you know what, there's no way that I'm going to do that, because I got to talk to Jesus about some stuff. Like over dinner, like I'm going to make sure that I'm kind of close to him, because I've got some things that I need to ask him. Or you could see that somebody else might chime in, well, it's not going to be me, because I was actually picked before that guy and that guy and that guy. Like, of the 12, like, I land at number 6. What about 7, 8, 9, 10, and beyond? Maybe it's their turn to go ahead and do it. Maybe they should be the one that should be donning the towel and washing my feet. But everyone just circled up instead, basically crossing their arms, going, no way, not me. That foot washing deal is for servants, not me. Because check this out, guys. Not only did they wait for somebody else to do it, they didn't even do it themselves, for themselves. I mean, think about that for just 1 second. Worrying about who's going to serve them, so self-centered, so into what they have going, that they didn't even do it for themselves. That's crazy. That's crazy right there. And so, at the beginning of chapter 13, we know that they basically come in. There's nobody there. Food gets served. They'd rather sit with somebody's nasty, stinky, dirty feet in their face and do so. And we see Jesus sit back and watch this whole mini drama unfold right before his eyes. And then he does the unthinkable. He pushes back from the table. He walks across the room, and what he does should shake us to the core. He takes off his outer cloak. He pours that water into the basin, picks it up, and heads to the table and starts washing feet. John chapter 13, verse 3. Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come from God and was going back to God, rose from supper. He laid aside his outer garments, and taking a towel, tied it around his waist. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel that was wrapped around him. Here's what Jesus could have done. Everybody could have been in there and it's like, hey, Peter or James or John or whoever, hey, why don't one of you guys go grab the jug of water, pour it in the basin, grab the towel, wash everybody's feet. He could have done that. He could have even said, hey guys, lots to talk about tonight. Why don't you get over there, wash your own feet, and let's take care of business. Or he could have even done a parable, right? Like launch a parable, how selfishness does not fly in the kingdom of God, and so you guys should want to, engage in serving one another. He could have done that even. All of those things would have been good, helpful, right, kind of pointed them in the right direction. But instead, he takes on the role of servant, understanding what I said earlier. You reproduce who you are. Who you are. That's what happens. And this is what we see him doing. He begins to wash everybody's feet. He sets the pace and lowers himself to the position of servant for all of history to go to school on. All of history gets to go to school on that. Imagine what it would have been like in that room after everybody gathered around the table. They thought it was time to eat. Jesus pushes back. They're like, hey, where's he going? Crosses the room, grabs the basin, comes and starts washing their feet. Imagine how quiet that would have gotten. Like, what is he doing? Now, let's make it more personal. Imagine how you would feel if Jesus did that for you. You were sitting at the table. You were waiting for somebody to wash your feet. You had not even taken the initiative to wash your own feet. Now, the one that you knew to be the Messiah, the one who was going to rescue mankind from sin, the one that God had sent, now he's right there at your feet, washing your feet. Imagine how quiet you would have been there. Because what Jesus has just done is he's basically carpet bombed the whole trajectory of humanity. Because the trajectory of humanity, like this is my life, maybe you can relate to this. I'm really good at taking care of me, myself, and I. Super easy to take care of what I want. Super easy to put my needs above other people's. Super easy to think of how this affects me. That's where I find myself far too often, and this is after a few decades of walking with Jesus. These guys had day in, day out encounter with him for 3 years, and I could say, man, what were they thinking? What am I thinking? I got 3 decades of walking with him, reading the Bible, letting his truth infiltrate my mind. It's easy for me to think of myself first, but here's what Jesus, he's carpet bombing that. And he's carving out a new trail by doing for them what they were too proud and selfish to do for each other. And when all 12 had their feet cleaned and dried, Jesus stands there with a filthy towel and a basin of muddy water. And then let's jump down to verse 12. When he had washed their feet and put on the outer garment and resumed his place, he said to them, do you understand what I have done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you're right, for so I am. If I then, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. Verse 15 is huge. For I have given you an example that you should also do just as I have done to you. Truly, truly, I say to you, a servant is not greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. If you know these things, blessed are you if you do them. There's so much at stake here in what we've read so far. And here's where we have to be careful. A lot of times we can read these things, and we've talked about this before. You can read it, and it settles in your mind. And now you know something. But here's what needs to happen, is that biblical truth needs to be watered. It needs to be constantly nurtured by the Word of God. And so we need to let that infiltrate our mind and then develop deep roots so that there's fruit that comes up from what's planted in here. Because when that begins to take root, what's stuck in here, what we know, begins to infiltrate our soul. And it settles deep down in who we are. And when what we know settles into here, then there's the outflow of that is transformation. Because if all we have is information without the opportunity to apply it, then we're in a dangerous spot. If all you do is know, then you've only got a little bit of what you need to be able to grab hold of. But when what you know seeps into the core of who you are, now you have traction. That's where you see transformation. And so we see that happening, and we don't want to miss what God has for us. And so let me just share a few observations. There's many in here, but this is just a few that I want to extract this morning that we can tackle. Right off the bat, when we look at these verses that we just read, we see that Jesus, second person of the Trinity, this is God in flesh form. He left perfection where everything was good and right, and he was worshiped, and then he chose to submit himself to the will of God the Father, came down here, and he began his rescue mission. He left it all. He descended into a space where he could then redeem. And so here he shows up, and we see at the end of his tenure here on this planet that he takes the basin, throws a towel over his arm, and starts scrubbing his disciples' feet. This is at the end, right? Like you would expect them to have had 3 years of instruction, like, man, let me get that for you, Jesus. Let me take care of that. I see how you have constantly put yourself in a space where you're serving and loving and pointing other people to the Father. Like, let me step in and be a part of that. But they weren't there yet. They weren't there yet. And so he hits the floor and starts scrubbing their feet. And sandwiched in there, let's go back to verse 15. He says, this is red letter stuff here, if you have red letters in your Bible. These are words from Jesus. For I have given you an example that you also should do just as I have done to you. He's given you and me as disciples of Jesus, followers of his. He's given us an example, not that we should know. Like, oh yeah, we know Jesus did that. Good, check. No, it's an example that we should what? Follow. There's an aspect of moving forward that we don't get to stay where we've always been. It's an example to follow. And so where my mind goes is immediately, I want to stack my life up against what this word says. And I want to see, like, is this my story? Is this becoming more my heart? Is this where my mind goes? Is this where I began thinking more like this? Or is it still stuck on me and myself and my story and what I want? Is that where it's still at? Because if that's where it's at, then that brings me to a place where I need to submit to God, right? And when it comes to this aspect of following the example of Jesus, here's where we have to be really careful, because we can get all tied up in performing for God. Thinking, okay, so here's the example, like, I'm going to do this so that I can get something from God. And it's not that. This isn't Jesus saying, if then. This is not an if then clause here. Like, this is an opportunity to follow his example because we want to obey and bring honor to him. Not so that we get something from him, but because we already have him, right? Like, that's how it's supposed to flow. And there's a bunch of reasons that people follow Jesus' example, aren't there? How many times have you followed Jesus' example because of guilt and shame? Been there? Because you were supposed to, and shame on you if you didn't. Maybe you've been somewhere that made you feel the guilties when you didn't. And you're like, maybe you feel that way now. Not my intention. Right? It's not, guilt and shame usually doesn't get anything accomplished. Like, it may last a day, a week, a month, maybe a year, but pretty soon people figure out, I'm moving on. Right? Guilt and shame doesn't produce. Sometimes people feel like they're forced to do it. You ever felt like you were forced to? Like, when we were kids, right? Like, go clean your room, go take care of that. You were forced to, go serve and accomplish some chores, right? Some people do it because they're forced. Some people have compassion. They actually move out and serve people out of compassion. Some people actually see a need and help. Whole bunch of reasons why people engage in serving. But when our heart is moving in the right place, there's a clarity in our mind and in our heart that God is advancing his purposes and plans. And guess what, guys? We get to play a part in that. We get to play a part in that. But we need help getting there, right? And so let me say this, guys, as plainly as I can, as simply as I can. so we're all on the same page. Every organization has a culture. Every organization has a culture. You know, like it just the way things are, right? You walk into a place and you can tell, like you can have a welcoming culture, you can have an isolated culture, you can have a serving culture, you can have a taking culture. There's all kinds of cultures that exist out there, and cultures matter. And here's what I hope is being developed here in these early stages. That what the culture is here at Vertical is that when something needs to be done, that we're known as the people who get it done. Not just inside the walls of the church. I'm not talking just inside the walls of the church. I'm talking everywhere we go. You see a need, and you begin to think, like, how might I play a part in this, God? What would you have for me? Because we got to go back to verse 15, right? He set us an example to follow, right? There should be a line of us looking to help and asking for something to do. And as a result, guess what happens? Things get done where we are, right? Because God intersects our life with other people. And as we intersect life with other people, there's all kinds of opportunities to step in and to be of assistance. All kinds of ways that we can serve and advance the kingdom of God. And so, man, I just hope that wherever we are, things get done. And in doing so, that what we're doing is displaying our desire to be like Jesus. That's it. Like, that's the heart behind it. I want to be like Jesus. Why? He's given me an example to follow. He's already paved the way. And so you've heard it said, like, somebody who follows Christ, right? You're a Christ follower. So if he goes left, then you go left. If he goes right, you go right. He says stop, you stop. If he goes, you go. And so as a Christ follower, you follow Christ. If he's given us an example of servanthood to follow, then as a follower, as a disciple, as one who wants to follow in our rabbi's footsteps, who wants to do what he did and wants to be like him, like, if we want to move in that direction, then it's going to be a servant-hearted way. It's going to involve serving, living the example that he says in verse 15. It happens here in 2024 and beyond. It has to move that way. And that's part of the rhythm that we talk about, just the rhythm of a disciple. It moves us in that direction. It's adopting a mindset of servanthood. In addition to, so that's the first observation I see. He's given us an example to follow. But then, in addition to that, John 13 and verse 17 gives us an amazing promise that comes with that. Let's go back to 17. He says, if you know these things, if what's in here has taken root and it begins to change your heart, and the outflow of your heart is to be like Jesus, to follow him and be involved in what he's doing in and through you, right? You want to be in that. It says, if you know these things, look at that word, blessed. Blessed are you if you do them. Blessed are you if you do them. Jesus is basically saying, hey, get that basin, grab that towel, head out, and take care of what needs to be taken care of. Join me in that work, and you will be blessed. There's blessing that comes with that. Now, what does it mean to be blessed by God? Like, what blessings come when you serve? The short answer, I don't know. I really don't. Here's what I do know. Here's what I'm sure of. When I read the Bible and I see the character of God, the goodness of God, the faithfulness of God, wherever he is, what ends up is good and right and advances his cause, his plans and purposes prevail. It's a great space to be. So if he's saying, join me in this work and you'll be blessed, that he's a good gift giver. Can we all agree on that? Amen? Yeah? He is a good gift giver. So if he is saying, if you join me in my work, if you follow me into servanthood, follow the example that my son has set, if you believe that God is a good gift giver, then you can reasonably expect that what you're going to get is good. It's going to be good for you. It's going to change who you are, the way that you think, the way that your heart beats. Like, you're jumping in on God's activity here. You're going to be blessed. So what does that mean? He's going to be a good gift giver. He always has been. Why should we expect anything less than what he's already done? He's faithful. He's faithful. Right? And basically, he's saying, I'm going to heap divine favor in your lives when you do what Jesus did. Now, if you explore your heart, because I did, like when I think about that, it's like, okay, we're blessed if we serve, if we do life like Jesus did. Sometimes, like I look at my past, things that I've done where I've served, sometimes serving doesn't feel like a blessing, does it? Sometimes you're like, oh. You're like, I don't want to get up early. I don't want to stay late. I wish I could just show up. I wish I didn't have to. Why did I buy a truck? I don't want to help people move. You know what I mean? Like, why? I'm at the point now where it's like if somebody's moving, like I'm going to like hire some of the young guys in the room and I'm like, here's $50, go help so-and-so move. You're going in my stead. You know what I mean? Because like I'm like going to lose an arm or something now. Like my feet aren't quite as, I'm not quite as fleet of foot anymore. And so it takes a little bit more out of me. But like how many times have you been there? Sometimes, like, can we just all admit, sometimes serving stinks, doesn't it? It's just like, I don't want to do that. I would just rather take a nap. I would just rather watch some TV. I'd rather just do what I want to do. That's the truth, right? It's just the truth. Like it's just the way that it is. But clearly there is a blessing involved. Otherwise, Jesus wouldn't have said it. He just wouldn't have said it. But when that seed is planted in here and it's constantly watered with biblical truth, then what begins to take root is something that only the Spirit of God can do in you and in me. And that's flipping the switch where it's no longer about me and what I want and what benefits me and how this affects me. And we're no longer the center of it all because God is all about himself and his plans and purposes, making his glory known. That's what he's about. And he's inviting us into that. And he set that in motion years ago. So that's the second observation. Right? Like we can see that there's a blessing. So first observation, we've been given an example to follow. So if we want to be like Jesus, if we want to engage in the life that Jesus engaged in, and we want to have impact for the sake of Jesus in this generation, then we follow his example. And secondly, we just kind of adopt this idea where it's like, okay, there is going to be blessing with this. There is going to be the hand of God on this. This is going to impact me for good. This is for my benefit and for his glory and good. And then the third piece here, last observation, and then I'll land a plane. What I see going down here, the choice Jesus made has nothing to do with convenience. Jesus knew he was getting ready to hit some of the hardest days the world has ever known, not just that he was going to deal with. He's hitting the fact that the sinless Son of God was going to be beaten and crucified, hardest days the world's ever seen. He's undeserving of that. But he willingly subjected his life to it to follow the will of God perfectly. He knows those days are coming. He knows his life's about over. He's got a lot of stuff running through his mind. He's probably hungry too. He's probably at this dinner party going, man, I'd like to dive into some lamb chops with you guys and just kind of hang out and take it easy. Would have been good. Like he would, nice break. Like I'm sure he would rather have just kind of taken a breather, just kicked back at the table and just taken a break. But instead, he pushes away from the table, crosses the room, grabs the basin, grabs a towel, and gets to work. And he sets the pace for those of us who follow. And as I look around, guys, we live in a culture, we're strapped for time. I get it. I get it. You know, like there's so much going on. And we're trying to fit it all in from the time we wake up till the time we go to bed. Like, man, it's like the RPMs are just throttled into the red line in it. We're trying to cram as much as we can into the day. And so what I'm saying this morning, you're just like, okay, Okay, great idea, Dave. Like, I get you, I follow you. Learn to live beyond yourself, learn to serve. Got it. I'm going to look at my schedule, and I'm going to see what I can fit in. I can see what I can fit in. Let me back us up. That is not what I'm saying. That is not what I'm saying, not at all. What I have to say is much harder than that. It's actually looking at your schedule ahead of time and going, all right, Jesus, where are you working? And how do I cut out time straight away, like at the beginning of it here? Like, I want to be involved in how you've wired me up, how you've gifted me. And so I want to orient my whole life around your will, your way. This isn't an add-on thing. Now it's a primary thing. And it's not something that works where we're just like, okay, well, I've got this little time, I can do this. But rather, coming to Jesus and saying, all right, I want to reorient my life around your plans and purposes, God. I know you're on mission, drawing men, women, and children to yourself, and I'm going to join you in that mission, and I'm looking for ways to advance your kingdom. What do you have for me? And then you orient your life around that. Now, you got to get up. Like, you have friends, you have family, you have work, you got to go do that. I'm not saying, abandon that, but it's not do everything you want to do and how you want to do it, and then with this little sliver of time, add on what you can. It's adopting a whole new mindset that you're on this planet to follow the example of Jesus and to be a servant. Be a servant. And so that's serving at home, husbands and wives and kids. That's serving at home, not being served. That's serving at school, students. Like, you find ways like to look around and you're not the one who's just like, you're here for me. When you're at a restaurant, for Pete's sake, be nice to those people. You know what I mean? They're not like, get me this, get me that. Like, my goodness, people, the word please has never hurt. You know what I mean? May I please have, or please, that's a good way. Like, they're there, that's their job, but come on, they're not there to wait on us hand and foot. But think of ways to bless and serve and encourage and point people to Jesus here in the church, at work, in your neighborhood. There's so many ways. And we here at Vertical, the leaders that we have on staff, I want you to know, like, we talk about this all the time in meetings, like, how can we come alongside people? What can we do to equip you to figure out how God's wired you up so you can be involved in what He's doing? Like, we want you serving both inside the walls and outside the walls. And like I said, we're at this stage in the next chapter, right? Like, I think back to 2 years ago. It was me, Gina, JC, and Karis just kind of pushing. And it moved a little bit. And then we had some interest meetings. Some of you were there. Some of you came to that. Do you realize that was like 2 years ago that we had interest meetings? It seems like a long time ago, doesn't it? Like, I'm looking in there. I see some of you were there. And we were talking about, here's what we were hoping for. Here's what we wanted God to do. And some of you guys came, and then you helped shove that rock up the hill, and it started moving, and it started going. And then we had Advent gatherings, and some more of you came and started helping. And then we had weekly gatherings, and then we were meeting at the Purpose Church down on the 50 back in Winter Garden. And then we moved and it's a good thing we moved from there, because we wouldn't have fit. Like, remember at Easter when we moved to the theater, there was no room if we would have stayed where we were at. People had to sit outside. We would have to figure out how to put a speaker out there, or they would have just left. You know what I mean? But now, like, here we are in this new space and this new opportunity that we have to engage what God has for us. More and more people are coming on and pushing, and there's more and more momentum, and we want you guys to get in on that. We don't want you to miss on what God has, because, see, the day's coming when we're going to have stories to tell. And who doesn't want a story to tell of, like, look what God did back 20, 30, 40 years ago. Like, that was a great story. Like, I got to be a part of something where I got in. Because right now, there's some people in here, like, you're in the stands. You're like, okay, well, I kind of look from the stands. Some of you are on the field, and you're looking from the field. And then some of you are in the game. We want everybody in the game. Everybody in the game. And it's not what we want from you. Don't hear that. This is actually what we want for you, because it goes back to verse 15. It's an example to follow. We want to help you get in on that. There's much to be done. We want you to experience the blessing that comes with doing God's work. Right? We want you in on that. And everywhere you look, like there's pipe and drape here, there's sound stuff, there's signs outside. We want to start stuff for kids, like we're discipling them so that they have a disciple group, just like we're going to have disciple groups. And if you're interested in hearing more about that, we're going to have a meeting immediately following, so that we've got the curriculum, and just going to walk through, here's what we're doing. If you want to hear more about that, it's going to be happening immediately following the gathering, just over here in the fellowship area. Just a 15-minute, hey, here's the why, here's the how, pray about it, see if that might be a fit, right? We want teams of people doing it, so that not one person's doing it week in, week out, but maybe you serve once a month doing that, pouring into kids. Or when you go to a disciple group, there's somebody leading that. Everywhere you turn, there's tons of people who are in the game, leveraging their life to advance the kingdom of God, and that's what we want you in on. We want everybody in on that. And so, guys, I wouldn't be much of a pastor or leader if I didn't lay out the encouragement to consider the way of the towel and the basin, to invite you into that. And so today, guys, we just want everyone, do we have the serve cards? Do we have those out? So could I get a couple people? Steph's going to grab some. We're just going to have here in just Steph and Jessica. They're going to pass you guys a serve card. And so there's pens. We have pens and serve cards that we want to have you guys fill out, so that everybody has a chance to just kind of fill it out and say, here's my name, here's my contact info. There's a bunch of boxes on, different ways that you can get involved. And so these are opportunities that we can engage in to consider what part you would play here. And then we want to just, explore that with you guys. We want to come alongside, answer any questions you may have, kind of point you in the direction. We need help with kids check-in. We'll need help with the disciple group for kids. We need help with setting up, with tearing down, pipe and drape teams. There's all kinds of ways that you can get plugged in. There's not just one thing. There's all kinds of opportunities. And sometimes it's just well, what would I do? I don't want to do what you're doing, Dave. And it's you don't have to do what I'm doing. I'm doing that part. But there are other parts that I don't do, or other people, gaps in the opportunities now that we just need to have filled. Sometimes it's going to be just for a season. You're oh, but I'm not wired up to do that. Well, sometimes we just do that, just as believers. It's hey, if there's a need, I just want to play a part in that. But if there's not, and that's already taken, and there's somewhere else that you really, really fit, hey, let's go for it. But just want to invite you. You guys can pass the cards out. And so just grab a card. You can fill one out, one per family if you'd like. But just grab the card and just give us just fill it out. Everybody fill it out, even if you're already serving, just so that, everybody doesn't think you're Jesus Jr. because you're I've already got 3 things I'm doing, so I can't seriously just want to make room for others. But just, kind of fill that out. And then on your way out, if you would do us a favor and actually just hand those out, or hand them back to the people in the back. And so as you guys are filling those out, I just want to let you guys know, this is an opportunity. This is an opportunity that we have to follow the example, to receive the blessing that he has, and to begin to leverage our life for that which will matter most to the gospel. And so, I dare you to try the way of the basin and towel. I dare you to consider what it looks like to just serve in a capacity that God has wired you up for, and begin serving on a regular basis, prepping for what God is getting ready to send our way. Because here in this semester, the school's getting ready to start. We've grown over the summer. I anticipate an exciting fall and spring. Let's keep pushing into what God has for us, bringing honor to God by multiplying disciples. And let's see what he does, because all we get to do is hang on for the ride, right? We're not forging a path anywhere. He's already forged that path. Now we just hang on for the ride. And so, ball's in your court, all right? Let me pray for us, and then we'll continue and worship through song. And I hope what you've heard today is just a blessing that God invites us in on, an opportunity to impact eternity. Jesus, what you've invited us into is no small thing. And what you did all those years ago was an example that is staggering. To think that you, the Son of God, the one who deserved to sit on a throne, the one who deserved to be worshiped and adored, the one who deserved to sit on that throne and not have to lift a finger, but have servants at his beck and call, meet every need and desire that you have. That would be our privilege to serve you in that way, because you deserve that. You have never sinned. You are holy. You are righteous. You are good. And you invite us to relationship with you. And so it is our privilege to serve you. And you have set an example that you didn't have to set. You could have just said, hey, one of you guys take care of this. Or even just take care of it yourself. But instead, you poured water into a bowl, and you grabbed a towel, and you engaged in a servant-hearted way to put others above yourself. And that's just the whole trajectory of your coming. The fact that you left heaven and came here to this earth as a baby, and then you fit into that human body, and then you lived a perfect life and died the death that we deserve to die, and you did it in a way that is one of the most horrific, just painful ways that was reserved for criminals. And you hung on that cross, and you willingly gave your life to buy our freedom. And so what we see is just a constant descent into humility and servanthood. And as a result, you are seated now. You are exalted at the right hand of God the Father, seated on the throne. And now we have an opportunity to join what you've started all those years ago. So thanks for the opportunity you give us to worship you and walk with you and know you, participate in what you're doing. Give us the mind of Christ. Give us a heart to serve. Change our ways. Set aside the me and myself, and to think in terms of what does this mean, and how do I advance the cause of Christ? What have you entrusted to me, and how can I leverage that for your name's sake in this generation, Jesus? Pray that you would shape this place to be a place where we willingly go into the spaces you've given us to serve and love and point other people